Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called Norway and Sweden Compared. This makes me very excited because I think, obviously not for them, but I think coming from an outsider's perspective, I think because they're both neighboring countries in Scandinavia, I think most people tend to get them confused. Obviously there's differences, but I think, again, just if you are from outside of those areas, it's sort of, a lot of people think they're very similar or they're the same and they just constantly get them confused. So I'm excited to find out the differences. Let's check it out and comment, like, and subscribe.
Norway and Sweden, or officially, the Kingdom of Norway and the Kingdom of Sweden, two magnificent bordering countries in Northern Europe. Both are Nordic countries. Heck, both are in Scandinavia. Wait, what's the difference between Nordic and Scandinavian? Well, these parts of the world are all considered Nordic, while just these countries are considered part of Scandinavia. Although you could also just say, quote, Scandinavia is made up of the countries located on the Scandinavian peninsula.
Finland
would you
as
look
well.
at that? Norway and Sweden make up the vast majority of the Scandinavian peninsula. Anyway, yes, both Sweden and Norway have a long shared history with strong cultural linguistic ties. Both are separated by a 1,630 kilometer border that meets up in the north, believe it or not, with Finland's border at a point called the three-country cairn. No, not Karen.
No, the stone.
A cairn is a human pile of rocks meant to mark something, but this one is special. It's basically a little monument made of concrete, and it is now on my bucket list to visit it. Dadgummit. Anyway, Norway and Sweden are two of the wealthiest countries in the world. Both rank really high on nearly every quality of life ranking list. Both have very low poverty. In fact, even low compared to much of the rest of Europe. That's probably a big reason why both consistently rank high on the World Happiness Report each year.
Probably.
By the way, this year Sweden ranks number 7 and Norway ranks number 8 on it.
Very similar.
How are they both so happy when both don't get much sunlight for half of the year?
Because they're rich.
Maybe a few reasons why. First of all, both are generally safe places to be, although Norway has less crime overall. Related to this, both have high societal trust. Basically, most residents of both countries trust each other, man, whether they actually know each other or not. Both have strong welfare systems. More specifically, both have versions of universal health care. Related to this, both have a really high life expectancy.
It's related to this,
both have generous maternity and paternity leave policies. Both countries offer free daycare, free preschool programs, and free college. Now, obviously, all of this great stuff isn't technically, quote, free. It's paid for by taxes, and residents of both are taxed more than residents of most other countries in the world. That said, Norway has lower taxes than Sweden overall. In my opinion, high taxes are not a reason to be happy, but most in both countries seem okay paying those taxes. The cultural practices, as well as economic and social policies of both countries, are often called part of the, quote, Nordic model, which not only includes a broad guarantee of certain public services, but also includes having strong unions, collective bargaining, and social corporatism. Social corporatism, aka social democratic corporatism, is basically a partnership between the workers and those who own the capital. It's not so one-sided like it is in most other countries, with the interests of capital having most of the power over the labor. Both countries have unitary parliamentary constitutional monarchies. That was a mouthful. And yep, both have had royal families going back more than 1,000 years. Let's get into some history. Cool beans? Humans have lived on the Scandinavian peninsula as far back as maybe 14,000 years ago. We have lots of artifacts that show the peninsula was thriving during the Bronze Age. But then the climate started changing and many started migrating. After this, many of them regularly interacted in productive ways and counterproductive ways with the Roman Empire to the south. By the early Middle Ages, a group had emerged on the peninsula known as the Norse. Yes. Vikings? No, there is no evidence that Vikings really wore horned helmets.
No, they're so cool.
And not all of them were warriors, but yes, they took to the sea, out to explore and often conquer, becoming expert sailors and navigators in their long ships. They raided, pirated, but also traded, so it wasn't all bad, okay? What's known as the Viking Age lasted approximately between the 700s and the Norman conquest of England in 1066. By that time, the kingdom Kingdom of Norway was a thing. No one knows for sure when the Kingdom of Sweden was actually born.
Nobody
Beginning
knows?
in the 1100s, the population of Scandinavia began to dramatically increase.
What
This
happened?
lasted until, you guessed it, the Black Death, which killed at least a third of the
Everyone?
population. Also a problem during this time were Christians coming up trying to convert the Norse into Christianity, but the Norse were generally not too keen on giving up their own religious traditions. A bunch of those unique Stav churches were built during this time. Most of
that's
the
so
few
weird.
that remain today are in Norway.
And
In
it's in a church
1397,
yard.
Sweden and Norway joined forces as part of the Kalmar Union.
What does
The two
Kalmar mean?
kingdoms shared a monarch, along with the Kingdom of Denmark, off and on
Isn't
until
Pomerania
1523.
Germany?
Sweden broke away that year under the leadership of Gustav Vasa, who helped bring the Protestant Reformation to Sweden, breaking away from Roman Catholic rule and nationalizing their holdings. Today, he's often considered the father of modern Sweden. Meanwhile, Norway stayed with Denmark. During the 30 Years' War, Norway and Sweden found themselves fighting each other. Sweden played
That's
a
bad.
significant role in that bloody war, famously under the leadership of Gustavus Adolphus. The Swedes basically saved the Protestant cause and weakened the Habsburg Catholic coalition. And there were also multiple direct wars between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden throughout the
fighting.
1600s. The last wars ended by 1660, and after some treaties, we got much of the modern borders of
Thankfully.
Norway and Sweden. For the rest of the 1600s and into the 1700s, Sweden was a great European power. This is when they began to establish colonies around the world. That said, it had
What
mostly
colonies?
an agricultural economy and ultimately lacked the resources to stay a world power for too long.
Oh,
Sweden
no.
and Norway once again found themselves at war with each other in
Oh,
the
not
Great
again.
Northern War, which lasted from 1700 to 1721.
That's a long time for a
This
war.
war actually ended with the defeat of Sweden, and Sweden quickly lost its world power status as well as some of its territory after this. But
Well,
at
that's
least
bad.
this marked their sweet age of liberty, a
Oh, that's
time of
good.
increased civil rights and democracy and
Okay,
stuff.
something good
Jump
came out
ahead
of it.
to the Napoleonic Wars, which
Also bad.
also shook up things quite a bit in Scandinavia. As a result of those wars, Sweden lost more land to Russia, and Norway was forced into a union with Sweden. Norway and Sweden together.
Yeah, they had to
again.
band together.
They shared a monarch for the next 91 years.
That's a long
Throughout
time.
the rest of the 1800s, tough times led to hundreds of thousands of both Norwegians and Swedes moving to settle in the Midwestern United States, and you still see that legacy today,
Yeah.
believe me. Still,
Yeah, you
by
do.
the early 1900s, both Sweden and Norway had begun modernizing. Well, especially Sweden. Both countries stayed mostly neutral in both World War I and World War
It's
II.
very
Germany
separated from them.
invaded and occupied Norway during the Second World War, but not Sweden. In fact, most of the refugees who fled the Nazis from Norway ended up in Sweden. Between the end of World War I and 1935, Norway had some instability with 9 different governments.
Wow,
After World
that's
War
a lot.
II, Norway
That's a lot
helped
of them.
start the United Nations, and Sweden was one of the earliest countries to join. During the
that's nice.
Cold War, Norway joined NATO, Sweden did not. But
Wonder
after
why.
Russia's recent invasion of Ukraine, it's looking like Sweden will in fact be joining NATO soon. In recent years, oil and good investments have helped
Norway.
Norway's economy zoom right past Sweden's. Today,
Yeah.
both are two of the most democratic countries in the world.
How
In
nice.
fact, according to the Economist Intelligence Unit, Norway ranks number 1
It's number
on
one?
the Democracy Index, and Sweden ranks number 4.
Oh, they're
Most of both
lagging.
countries are sparsely populated. Most of the population
that
of
helps.
both live either in the southern portions or along the coasts. People live even way up here, yo. The biggest cities in
How
both
cold
are
is it?
also the capital cities. Both are growing at about the same rate. Both have areas north of the Arctic Circle, for crying out loud. A third of Norway is actually north of the Arctic Circle. Up
that's a-
here, they get
that's
the
a lot.
midnight sun in the summer with daylight nearly at all hours of the
That's
day,
wild.
but they also get the polar night in the winter where it's dark all day. But at least in the winter, they have a great chance of seeing the northern
Yes!
lights, which, holy crap, look at that.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's also on my bucket list to one day see the northern lights.
Absolutely.
Both have milder climates compared to many other
How
areas
mild?
at similar
Doesn't seem mild.
latitudes. This is due to the temperate waters of the Gulf Stream. Both have historically not had to worry about major natural disasters as much as most other countries in the world. Due to something called post-glacial rebound,
Whoa.
the land in both countries is still rising. Therefore, both are continuously gaining land, rising from the sea. The Klarälven River flows through both. Both have tens of thousands of islands. Sweden's largest island is Gotland, right there in the Baltic Sea. Norway's largest island is Spitsbergen, which is part of its archipelago way up here called Svalbard. Around 3,000 folks live up in this unincorporated area that's pretty much near the top of the world. The biggest town there, Longyearbyen, is the world's northernmost settlement with
I'm gonna guess it's called Longyearbyen, as in the long dark night, something like that's the translation.
At least a population of 1,000. Located there is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, which will eventually store billions of seeds in case of, world catastrophe. By the way, if you really want to learn a lot about Svalbard, I highly recommend Cecilia Blomda's YouTube channel. She does a phenomenal job highlighting this amazing place. Anyway, both Norway and Sweden have freedom to roam laws, which means you can camp wherever you want without asking permission as long as it's not private property. Both are increasingly becoming more ethnically and religiously diverse in recent years. 1 out of 3 residents in Sweden have at least one parent born in a foreign country. The biggest religion in both is Christianity. That said, a sizable portion of the population have no religion at all. In fact, both are highly secular countries overall. That said, Sweden is the only Nordic country without a state church. Both countries spend a higher percentage of their GDP on education than most of the rest of the world. Both invest a lot in renewable energy. In fact, almost all energy in Norway comes from renewable energy sources, with hydropower making up the bulk of it. In the northern parts of both countries is the Sapmi region, traditionally settled by the Sami people, but now has a more diverse group living there. Sami culture is actually quite a well-known export out of both countries. Residents of both tend to be taller on average than people in most other countries in the world. Both have what's known as the Nordic model approach to prostitution, in which it's illegal to buy sex, but not to sell the use of one's own body for such services. The minimum age to drink alcohol in both is 18, but not just any type of alcohol, so it's complicated, and a lot of bars and nightclubs in Sweden won't let you in until you're at least 20. Both are big rivals when it comes to cross-country skiing, apparently, but it's probably no surprise to you that winter sports tend to be pretty big in both countries. Ice hockey, skiing, biathlon, the one that combines cross-country skiing and rifle shooting. Norway,
what does rifle have to do with a biathlon?
Has won more medals in the Winter Olympics than any other country in the world. But in 7th place on the medals list is, good old Sweden. That all said, football, or soccer as us dumb Americans call it, is probably the most popular sport in both countries. And don't forget floorball, baby. Both are known for their Scandinavian folklore. Stuff like trolls and elves, which apparently aren't real, I just found out. Both are also known for their heavy metal bands, specifically in Norway, the influential black metal scene, and in Sweden, death metal, baby. Oh yeah, both are even in the same time zone. Dang, that was a lot of similarities. They share a lot of things. For the rest of the video, let's take a look at differences between the two. First of all, Sweden is bigger in land area. Oh yeah? Well, Norway has more coastline. A lot more coastline. Like more than 8 times as much. Hey, I remembered the coastline paradox, buddy. Also, according to various sources, Norway may have anywhere between the 2nd and 7th longest coastline of all countries in the world. To the north, Norway borders the Barents Sea. To the west, the Norwegian Sea. To the south, the North Sea. Wait, that sounds weird. But yeah, I just confirmed it. It's true. Sweden, meanwhile, borders the aforementioned Baltic Sea to the east. Oh, and there's the Gulf of Bothnia. Much of it is covered with sea ice in the winter. Sweden has around twice as many people. It also has a higher population density. Sweden also has bigger cities. It has 2 metropolitan areas with more than 1 million people, Stockholm and Gothenburg. Meanwhile, Norway has just one, Oslo. Now, this may surprise you a bit, but Swedes make up the biggest ethnic group in Sweden, and Norwegians make up the biggest ethnic group in Norway. This also might surprise you. The most common language in Sweden is Swedish, and the most common language in Norway is Norwegian. Yeah, the two
Who would have
languages are
known?
similar. Norway goes further north. In fact, it's Europe's most northern country, and it goes further east than Finland.
Oh,
Norway
they
has
have a little
overseas
tail.
territories. Some of these are on the other side of the world.
What are
Sweden
they?
has a slightly milder climate overall. That said, both have an oceanic climate in their southern portions and continental and subarctic climates
Oh, it
throughout
varies.
most of the rest of their countries. And yes, both have some tundra where there's higher altitudes.
Sure.
Norway has more mountains. While the Scandinavian mountains run through both countries, most of the range runs through Norway, and this is where you get the highest
Yeah, it's really
and
Norwegian.
more dramatic peaks. Much of Sweden is actually just gently rolling
look so
lowlands.
different.
Sweden has a lower cost of living. Yep, it's
It's cheaper.
generally cheaper to live there, but that makes sense as Norway has both a higher GDP per capita and higher average household income. Major industries in Norway include petroleum, natural gas, shipping, and fishing.
Makes
Major
sense.
industries in Sweden include machinery, motor vehicles, telecommunications, and pharmaceuticals. Norway is well known for its beautiful fjords, which are long, narrow, and deep trenches between high cliffs filled with
They're
water.
gorgeous.
Most were formed by ancient glaciers. Dang, look at that. Nice. Yeah, Norway has more fjords than any
you
other
find them
country in the world.
in other
That
places?
said, Sweden has some
What?
fjords too.
Oh.
Look at that. Norway is also known for its dramatic waterfalls.
What's a waterfall?
Sweden
I didn't
is
realize.
more forested and has more farmland. Norway gets
because
more
it's flatter.
precipitation overall. Sweden spans 14 degrees of latitude. Norway, 13 degrees. Sweden has 25 provinces. Norway has 11 counties. The median age is
counties.
higher in Sweden. Residents of Sweden tend to be less religious. In fact, more than half of Swedes identify as non-religious. More
Wonder
people
why.
in Sweden live in cities. Norway generally has faster internet speeds. Marijuana is legal for medicinal purposes in Norway, but completely illegal
Oh.
in Sweden. So
Flat
as I
out
briefly
illegal.
brought up earlier, Norway has huge oil reserves, and that's a big reason why it's such a wealthy
Yeah, of
country.
course.
But it also has used that oil money to start a massive pension fund that benefits its citizens.
That's amazing.
Way to go, Norway. One of
Yes.
my favorite stores, actually the largest furniture store in the world, IKEA, started in Sweden, and it's actually a great place to get a small sample of Nordic culture and
Meatballs?
make videos
What?
like this.
It's just in the right place.
While nearly all residents of
What?
both countries celebrate Christmas, in Sweden, many apparently have a tradition of watching Donald Duck cartoons on Christmas Eve. Norway
Why?
has the highest numbers of electric
on earth?
cars per person in the world.
Is that
In
a car?
9 in 10 cars currently sold in Norway are either electric or hybrid. And
That's
don't get
nice.
mad,
That's
bro, but in
sustainable.
my humble opinion, better music comes out of Sweden. Before I do
didn't know
make
what-
any more of you mad, I better wrap this motion picture up. In conclusion, it's obvious that Norway and Sweden are two of the most beautiful and prosperous countries on the planet. They've also both greatly influenced the rest of the world. That said, maybe not enough. Perhaps the rest of us would benefit more
Yes.
if we paid more attention to them and
Wholeheartedly agree.
learn from their success.
Yes.
I guess that's a big reason why I made this video. A Norwegian ship called Endurance sailed out of Norway for Antarctica in 1912. Unfortunately, 1 year later, the ship got stuck in sea ice and sank in the Weddell Sea. You can learn all about the ship's amazing journey as well as the recent discovery of the remains of the ship in a new series called Endurance Rediscovered, featured exclusively on History Hit. In it, Dan Snow retraces the journey of Sir Ernest Shackleton on his most celebrated voyage to the point at which his ship Endurance was crushed and sunk, and retracing his remarkable journey towards safety. But it's not just this show. History Hit features hundreds of history shows actual history shows, you know, like the History Channel used to show, but better. Go to the link in the description of this video to save 50% off your next 3 months of History Hit. Be sure to use code MrBeat at checkout. Thanks to History Hit for once again sponsoring this video. So which is better, Sweden or Norway? I especially want to hear from you if you are from one of these two amazing countries. And a special shout out to my good friend Dan for looking over the script of this video. Many of his ancestors came over from Norway to the American Midwest as part of that wave I mentioned that happened in the 1800s. Finally, which two countries would you like for me to compare next for this series? Let me know. Thanks for watching.
Wow, there's just, again, they're so similar, but at the same, there's differences, but I was just struck about how similar they actually are. Obviously, I think if you go into more cultural things, because obviously if you look at the whole economical and sort of political way of things, I think they're just very, very similar. But probably, I think the main differences, you'll probably find them in the cultural sort of way of life and, you know, how people are. Usually, even though yes, of course, they also share a lot of things, but I would imagine the biggest sort of differences come from that and how they interact with other people or between themselves. But again, it's just they're so incredibly similar. I don't know, you know, as a tourist, I would love to visit both of them. I think they are beautiful countries. Although, I think probably if I had to, I don't know, choose one, I think maybe Norway, it's a priority, but only because of the fjords. I just think, I really love the fjords, the idea of these huge mountains and there's a river. I really like that. So I don't know, maybe that, and of course the Northern Lights. So I think in Sweden you can also find Northern Lights. So I don't know, it's just, again, it's just a matter of preference, but I think they're both beautiful countries. But I was just so shocked about, just talking about sort of the landscape, how different Sweden actually looks, because I mentioned, yes, they're very similar countries, and you can see, and when you look at the statistics, they're usually, you know, it goes, 7 and 8, 1 and 2, it's always very similar, as in the whole, you know, the world index, the world economic index, whatever, all of those things, where they're just they're constantly grouped together, they're constantly ranked high, is all of this. But, and you think, oh yeah, that's why people get them confused all the time, because they're both sort of, and they were literally the same people for a huge amount of time throughout history. They were the same people, so there's really no difference. But it's really funny that, looking at the landscape, I can really just see the main difference there, because it's, when you look at something, and it's very, I think, Norwegian thing, I think specifically when it comes to mountain ranges and probably lakes, and just certain views that, of course, that's Norway. But when you look at Sweden, it's very different. I think that it's a flatter country. They don't really have a lot of mountains, even though, of course, they have them. But there's something very specific about the Norwegian, I don't know, the woods and the trees, they just look very different, I think, from the Swedish ones. So I think that's probably one of the main differences. Although I think, obviously, if you're not for the untrained eye, if you're just looking at, you know, you're getting a glimpse of those things, I don't know if you can actually pinpoint, that's Sweden or that's Norway. But I think in the wider sort of macro aspect of it all, I would say, yes, I think Norway, it's, you know, has more mountains, has more lakes. I know, so they're just a little bit different. But apparently Sweden also has fjords, but they look different as well. Even though the mountains themselves, they are sort of, I don't know, the rock and the stones, I don't know how to explain it, but they're a different color. I don't know, they don't look similar. So I love it. I would love to go to both a Norwegian fjord and then a Swedish fjord, so I can compare both of them and see, I can see a difference now. But as for the cultural things, I think there's some surprising things about it. You know, there's the whole, the prostitution thing, I didn't really understood, to be honest. It's not illegal to sell your body, but it's illegal for people to buy it. Then how does it work? And if I understood it correctly, probably I didn't, because I was, there's something I'm missing here. The pot, it's legal in Norway, but in Sweden it's absolutely forbidden. And also I think the religion as well. I think it was in Norway, there's more, I think people are more Catholics, you know, or more Christians, Catholic, you know, they profess the Catholic religion. And in Sweden, more people are agnostic and they don't really believe in a god or whatever. I think those are probably the main sort of key differences as in cultural things. But otherwise, I just think they're very similar, because even though something like music. Apparently, he mentioned, "Oh, Swedish music is better." I don't know. I wouldn't know. I don't think I've ever heard either a Norwegian or a Swedish band or singer. I don't know. I'm not going to get into it. But it's funny that they were mentioning, oh, it's really heavy rock. I think it was heavy metal, dark metal, something of the sort. It's just very, I don't know, let's say leaning towards heavy rock. And both of them, they call different because I think obviously they have different genres and they're a little bit different. They're not exactly the same. But even though it's sort of one called death metal and the other's called sort of black rock, I don't know. I just said two names, but they're just very similar. So it's sort of the same music and it's the same music in different fonts. Let's put it that way. It's very, again, obviously there's going to be differences, and that's why you have a difference, and you're like one of those better, because obviously there's going to be certain things that are just going to differentiate one from the other. But they're very similar. You can see the root. Oh yeah, they probably come from the same place, and the roots themselves are probably very similar. And I don't know, maybe it's a cultural thing because they both have, all the elves and what is it, the elves, the little trolls. They also apparently share them. Although I would imagine as well that they also have differences. A Swedish troll is, I don't know, has green hair, and the Norwegian troll doesn't have any hair. I don't know, whatever. But my point is that even though they're the same it's folklore, obviously. They have the same creatures, but there's going to be differences in attitude and probably how they're perceived. Maybe some of them are evil, and in another country, no, they're nice, we like them. I don't know. But it's probably going to be something like that. But my point is that they're probably derived from the same sort of cultural background, which of course is not a surprise, because even though they were constantly fighting, there were a lot of wars. I didn't know that they were constantly, for a period of time, they were sort of constantly fighting each other. There were wars between themselves, and pretty long wars as well. But then they also, I think I knew the part about them sort of share. It was just one country. I don't think it was specifically one country. That's the thing. They just share a monarch because it was the same, each territory was separate, but they just were beholden to the same monarch, to put it that way, even though then there was another war. I think they just became sort of independent from each other. But even then, if you share a monarch for, I don't know, for like 100 years, and then besides that, you share the Vikings and, they're the other people, and, again, they all descend from the same people. So, of course, it's not a surprise that they just have a lot of similarities, because it's the same culture. And even though, of course, when modern borders came on and everything was a little bit separate, that's where the little differences start to appear. But ultimately, they're kind of the same people. And I like that, because I think how nice it must be. You have a really good neighbor. Obviously, the relation between them must be super nice. It must be super, really good relationship between those two neighboring countries. And it's not just that, because, again, you always have a sort of a partner. Obviously, I know in geopolitical situations is not the same as having, like a partner in life. But I don't think it's good to have an ally, a powerful ally. I think it's really good, because they're both, they're neighboring, it's good to have good relations with your neighbor. But in circumstances like this, specifically, when they're both, they're constantly ranked higher, and, they're the higher in the world happiness, whatever, or the World Economic Index, they both sort of share the same economical and political model. It's nice because you're not constantly in conflict with someone that's literally right next in your backyard. So I have a great ally that's really powerful, and it's just as powerful as I am. So it's a really good thing, of course. And I think probably that came because they're a little bit separated from Europe, because obviously they're Nordic, Scandinavian countries. They just probably didn't have a choice. They were constantly being separated from mainland Europe, just because, again, it's colder and it's sort of a little bit separate. They have a different culture than probably the rest of Europe or other countries in Europe. Not necessarily, because I know each country and each region is going to have their own culture. But yeah, of course. I think it's usually, like he said, it's good that we should, we as in the rest of the world, should definitely learn from them. I don't know how, because I know that it's probably not about, we have to replicate the Nordic economic model, the all the trust in people having their governments, and, they have, the democracy is like the strongest in the world, and people live super well. They are apparently very rich, and all the taxes paid for a lot of good things. And they just have a lot of really good things that I think we, as in all the rest of the world, can learn from them, and probably not just copy their model, because the model probably wouldn't work in other places, because each country has its own little things and little details that would probably make it impossible to replicate this exact same in this country, because again, the cultural things are different. I don't know, it's going to be different, because again, no country is the same, and no country situation is going to be the same, even though they're very similar, yeah, but it's simply not the same. But again, we can learn from them and maybe just try to adjust and try to adapt certain things to make a better world, because they seem to know what they're doing. So I'm constantly worried. I don't know, I constantly ask myself this, they seem to know what they're doing. Let's ask them, and maybe maybe try to replicate or maybe learn from them and try to create new models that keeping this as sort of the basic the basic ideas, and adapt it to something that makes it, and let's make it work, make it work for us, basically. But that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.